Hello, my name is Joe Park, and I'm the CEO of Horizon Stewardship. Welcome to Optimizing Your Church's Website for Recurring Giving. Our speaker today is Richard Rogers. Richard is a Senior Vice President with Horizon Stewardship. He's been doing this work for over 10 years, and he's written the book, Church's Guide to Reoccurring Giving. If you're interested in this, it's available at Amazon, published by Abington, but it's a step-by-step guidebook that gives specific and practical advice for churches of every type and size as you begin to develop recurring giving for your church. Today's presentation is focused on optimizing your website. I'm going to be your host, and technical director in the background is Latricia Wilson. She's going to be helping us to manage the Q&A session, which will be available at the end of the presentation. All of the resources discussed today, as well as a download of today's video, is going to be available on Giving 365. This is Horizon's on-demand resource library. It's completely free. It is full of all kinds of resources. But the top file or tab that you can click on is full of resources specifically directed to managing generosity in a time of social distancing. I would encourage you, if you'd like, to go ahead and sign up during this presentation. It'll give you a jump on things tomorrow. There are only 10 persons that can be in the library at any given time. So if you sign up, I'd encourage you, instead of spending time in the library looking around at the various resources, that you would sign up, then back out so somebody else can do it. Tomorrow, you're going to receive an email with instructions on how to download this webinar and the resources that are described in this webinar. They've not yet been posted there. You'll see them tomorrow after you receive the email. So Richard, we're excited to have you today. I'm going to turn it over to you and listen and learn.
Thank you, Joe. Really excited to be with you all today and be able to talk to you about something that is just so important to us in the season that we are in. I just really believe that we're at an unprecedented time in the church's history to be focused on recurring giving and really to have our congregation get on board and be a part of these strategies that'll give us resourcing strength in the days ahead once we even are back to being together physically. And so let's just make sure, first of all, in case you haven't been a part of the webinars that we've done in the last week or so, let's just refresh a little bit on what is recurring e-giving. Recurring e-giving is more than just electronic giving. Electronic giving, as Joe often states, is really just another way that we pass the plate. The differentiation between e-giving or electronic giving and recurring giving is that recurring giving is when the donor chooses the amount and frequency for gifts that automatically are sent to the church. In other words, if a gift does not occur without any repetitive action from the donor, then it is not recurring. So if the donor is having to go back to do something, then that gift may be reoccurring, but it is not recurring until nobody's having to do anything for that to happen. And that's specifically what we want to try to drive you toward at this time. So just as a reminder, again, some financial benefits of recurring e-giving is PushPay told us back in 2018 that e-givers give 33% more than traditional givers. And from a nonprofit perspective, Network for Good taught us that nonprofit recurring donors give 42% more. And there are other side benefits that are connected to discipleship when you compare electronic givers to traditional givers, not just non-givers, but literally when you compare electronic givers to traditional givers, you see things like Bible study, Sunday school, several other metrics there that from the Vanco Church Giving Study findings that say that, hey, anytime that we can point people towards, engage people in electronic giving, we are making a difference in their overall spiritual development as well. So what I want to do is talk to you today about really one specific area. So our webinar today will be limited to just some really targeted messaging around a certain type of electronic giving. So we've hopefully by now, many of your churches are already using messaging like this in worship and around your site, that there are multiple ways for people to give. I've seen messages in services. There are 3 ways to give and 4 ways to give, and here's one even that's 5 ways to give. But most important right now is for us to really focus in on just one thing, and what that is through your church's website. And so we're going to talk today about your church's homepage and your church's giving page. Now, if you're not familiar with the technology, your homepage is just the very first thing that people see when they type in your web address. So if your church website is, www.anychurch.org, when they type that into their browser and hit go, it's the very first thing that people see when they interact with your church's website. And so that's your homepage, and that's what I'm talking about first. Now, remember, when it comes to your church's homepage, you only get one chance to make a first impression. User engagement is what all of this is really about. And so it is vital that we make some strategic choices about what that first impression is going to be like. We don't want to just have a ton of words and schedules and whatever all over our homepage. Our homepage is what's going to help us clearly state our purpose, and it's either going to help draw people in or it's going to push them away, especially as it relates to guests and people who are just learning about your church. So your homepage clearly states your focus and priority, whether you are intentionally messaging that way or not. It does. And so what they see when they first come on board is going to help them determine, hey, is this a place, a church that I'm excited about? Is this a place that I want to know more about or not? And so just be aware, your church homepage is either compelling or it's repelling. I think we're either drawing people in, we're either drawing donors in, or we're saying, we're not, it's not really that important to have your attention right now. So user engagement is the whole point of your website. So let's talk a little bit about user engagement, Joe. There are a lot of different variables related to user engagement. First of all, we live in an image-based society. And so obviously our website, our homepage needs to have good images that help us begin to tell our story. We don't want to have a whole bunch of words that people are going to have to read to try to figure it out. We want to use images. Another component of user engagement is navigation. So there are different ways to navigate any website. And some of the things that you'll see, some elements of navigation are here in the bullet points that I've listed. The first format question that you want to address is my site going to be driven by scrolling or clicking? So not too many years ago, all of our websites were basically driven by clicking. So you used your mouse and your cursor and you clicked on things that you wanted to see, and you used different menus and different pages as you navigated the site. But because of the prevalence now of mobile devices and the way that we utilize mobile devices, there's a concept called content scanning. We live in an age where people more and more are just scanning through content and looking for key images or key words that interest them. And so they're more inclined to also want to do that when they're a part of your homepage, even on their laptop or their desktop. And so scrolling is a way to format your website that's different than clicking. And so that's just a choice that you'll need to make. And I just say more and more sites are moving to a navigation process that's more conducive to scrolling. And again, social media has done that. People's interaction with mobile platforms. Then you're also going to have menus, which again, we've seen on websites for a long time. But I would encourage you to have limited numbers of menus. You don't need a ton of content on your home page. So real limited strategic use of menus. And then obviously you're also going to have a giving button. And the important aspect of giving button as it's related to our topic today is that I would encourage you to make that giving button be a direct link to a way somebody can give. Here's a great example of a church that's done that. When you select or click on the Give Now button, which as you can see, you're not having any trouble at all finding it. It's in a complementary color to something else here on their homepage, but it stands out. Obviously, it's something that they're trying to draw your attention to. And when you click on that Give Now button, you immediately go to their giving page. What I like about this is that there's not an intermediate step that they've added in there. They're trying to limit the number of steps that you have to take to actually be able to take action. And so I think it's a great way that they've built their homepage. So I wanted to show you a good example of that. It is not a drop-down menu. It's simply a button that you click on so that you can take an action.
Richard, before we leave that, I'd like to make a point. If you go back to that slide, when the donor clicks on that Give Now button, which we prefer being upper right-hand corner, bright color, like Richard talked about, you're actually going to a third-party site. So you're leaving your website and moving to whoever is hosting your online giving.
Yes, and that's usually the case, Joe. That is usually the case, not always, but yeah, that is often the case. And so we'll talk more about how you transition the donor and how it's important that transition is handled well. We talk about branding your giving page, but yes, that is correct in most cases. As you look at other aspects of user engagement, I would say that less is more. If you don't put a ton of content on your homepage, that's probably helping you to get your attention, to get the attention of the donor where you want it. And so, again, just the things that are essential and keep those items there where people can see them. And then there's a term or a phrase, above the fold, that I think came out of the newspaper industry, Joe, back years and years ago. But I still see it showing up in digital media, blogs, and current content today. And what it means is that people's focus tends to be on the front page, and really back in the days of newspapers, above the fold, literally on the front page. And that's why the most important headlines were always placed there. Well, it's got an important reality. 10 years ago, 80% of the content that was consumed, 80% of page visits on websites 10 years ago was on the first page. It was on the home page. That was where all the attention was given. Now, because of, again, I think the way that people interact with mobile devices and online content through social media, they're doing more scanning. And so there's less priority on the very first view or the very first screen worth of content, but it's still heavily slanted to the first two. So 10 years ago, where we were at 80%, now today, the first page is 54%. And the next page is 24% of all content being consumed. So literally in the first two screens worth of content, and whatever that is, whether that's on a mobile device or whether that's on a laptop, those first two pages are 78% of the content that's consumed. And then the rest, the other 22%, is everything else. And so it's really important for us to make sure that our key information that we want to share occurs very, very quickly in the content that we're sharing. And then the last point about user engagement that I want to make is that mobile responsiveness is no longer optional. I've been saying for years now that mobile use, being optimized for mobile use, is important. Mobile responsiveness means that people have to be able to interact with the information that you're giving them on a mobile device. And so that means that whether it's a picture that has to load over time, or whether it's just the number of clicks and the amount of time that they'll spend on each slide, each space, is very important to them. And so that needs to be able to happen quickly, and they don't need to be resizing or looking around or trying to find the content that you're getting them to. It needs to be right there, responding to whatever mobile device, whatever tablet, whatever phone they're looking at it on. It needs to be sized right. As you can see, that from 2014 to 2019, in just a 5-year period, the online donation percentage tripled nearly in a 5-year period. So our building our site so that it is optimized for mobile use and mobile responsiveness is critical.
So Richard, I know there's a lot of information coming at our pastors today, but what I've heard so far is you've got to make that donation button big and bright so people can see it. The second thing is when you're putting your homepage together for your church or your as well as your donation page, you really get 84% of your donors are going to stop or your viewers are going to stop after the first 2 pages. So that idea of above the fold and below the fold, that front page idea really continues to be a major point when you're developing your both your web page and your donation page.
Yeah, and I think it's important too, because the number of steps. I mean, when I'm interacting with Church's site, when I'm doing coaching, Joe, working with the church on some of our next level generosity strategies, I'll go in and visit, make a donation, and sometimes I did it this morning, clicked on a giving button on their homepage, and it took me to an intermediate page that then said, if you want to make a donation, click on the link above. And I thought, well, good grief, that's what I just did. Why are you asking me to do that again? And so, yeah, we just need to be strategic and think like the user, think like the end user, and then build our site to support that experience.
So I know you're going to get deeper into this as we go through it, but one of the big mistakes that we see churches make is when they set these up years ago, they went with the default settings that the third-party provider gave to them. And they're usually are very basic, don't give the kind of robust interaction that we're looking for. And so a main point that we want everybody to do is go to your website and make a donation, walk through these pages so that you can see what is happening on your website, and do it on a mobile device. As Richard talked about, that experience, that 26% of your donors are using that mobile device. So be sure you're testing it on the mobile device as well as on your home screen.
Absolutely. So let's jump into your church's giving page. Again, this is the first thing they see when they click the giving button. And so that's what the rest of our time together is going to be focused on. And there are at least 7. I've identified 7 important factors, and I'm going to kind of walk you through this so that you see kind of an overview of where we're headed. But I also want you to know that when you get access through our on-demand resource library, that Giving 365 link tomorrow, I definitely want you to download the resource that we're going to be providing to you, and that'll help you walk through, excuse me, these 7 different areas. And what I'm telling you today is you don't have to do everything just the way that we say it. But what we want you to do is think strategically in each of these 7 areas, because every one of these can make a difference in the user experience. It can also make a difference in your overall participation in recurring giving, and ultimately the resourcing that you have access to. So we believe that every one of these areas is important to you. And so this is just a little bit of a roadmap for where we're headed in the minutes ahead. So the first issue we want to talk about is branding. It is really important that your giving page has similar branding to the rest of your site. In fact, Network for Good published a study last year, I believe, may have been 2018, that said that branded giving pages have 7 times greater donations than generic giving pages. Now, I know they're coming at it from a nonprofit perspective, but the principle there is that we need to pay attention to is that trust matters an awful lot. And so one way to build trust is through our brand. And when I'm talking about branding, I mean your logo and your name, color schemes, design styles. Remember, brand equals trust, and your church trusts you. Joe brought it up earlier that oftentimes when we click on a giving button, we're going to a third-party provider's page that's managing those transactions for us, which we need. But what you need to do is make sure that as they help you build that page, that it doesn't feel like they've just yanked you out of your church's brand in a site that you trust and taken you to somebody that you don't know and that you don't know anything about. And so it greatly, it's a great barrier to participation when it feels like you've been yanked out of a system that you trust and sent somewhere else. And so remember, brand equals trust. Your church trusts you. That's why they were on your homepage. That's why they've clicked your giving button. That's why they're now on your giving page, because they want to make a gift. They want to do that. So here's a great example. Many of us have heard of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. When you're on their homepage, this is what you'll experience. I think it's interesting that they have 2 different Donate Now buttons, but they certainly have one top right. Research has said that for many, many donors, many users, our eyes tend to navigate top right. And so you'll see that it's a color that they've chosen that's complementary. In fact, it matches their logo. Their Donate Now button, and it's top right. They also have one later. They're not going to let you get away from that. I'll also tell you that on this specific site, there are actually only 2 screenfuls of content on the entire homepage. If you start to scroll down on this site, you're only going to get 1 more screenful of information. I think that's really interesting, something that we can learn. But when you do click on that Donate Now button, look at what you see. Again, complementary colors. They're using the same red from their logo. They're also using blue that they introduced you to on the homepage, so that everything feels very similar. Now, I don't know what third-party provider they're using or if they are, but I know it doesn't feel like I am. When I go here, I just see what's next, and it feels like that I'm still dealing with St. Jude. So ease of use is the second area that I want to cover with you, the second factor on your giving page, and speed does matter. Whether it's actual time, speed, the time it takes for a page to load, the time that it takes for me to figure out what you want me to do, speed matters. The number of clicks matters. Don't make a donor take 20 steps if they can do it in 3 or 6 or whatever it is that your system, whatever the minimum number of vital steps are, identify those, think about those. You do not have to gather every bit of information that you could ever want before you let somebody make a gift. If you're trying to improve the information in your church management software, this isn't necessarily the time to update every bit of information you've ever had on a donor. And so speed matters because engagement matters. Remember mobile responsiveness. What's it like? How easy is it for them to have that interaction on their phone, on their tablet, or whether they're sitting at their desktop? But mobile responsiveness matters, and you've got to have this happening. I mean, this is going to be crucial for you. Minimize the required steps, and then ensure that you provide an option for a guest user or one-time donor. That is not a default or preferred choice, but you do want to provide that. We don't want to assume that everybody wants to give a trackable donation. We don't want to assume that everybody wants to feel like that they have to be a member of our group to be able to make a gift. And so as a later option among your giving options, and we'll talk about those in a little bit, make sure that you give somebody the option to make a gift anonymously or just as a one-time donor. So ease of use is a really important factor. Now, donors really like options. Good night. If you know anybody today, you know that we certainly like to have choices. And so my encouragement is to have you think, again, strategically about the options that you're giving them. And when it comes to our giving page, there are actual several different layers of this. The first thing that you want to do is you want to offer people multiple ways to give from your site. I was visiting a church website yesterday and loved that they had an ACH enrollment form right there on their giving page, just ready for somebody to fill out an ACH enrollment. We also want to give them options to be able to give via debit or credit cards. Some churches don't encourage the use of credit cards, and so they do debit only. That's fine. Do what works and makes sense for your church. A lot of churches use payment aggregators like PayPal, Apple Pay, Amazon Pay, etc., as a giving option. I don't think in a best case scenario that any one of those things is the only option that you want people to have. There are still websites that give people an option for an e-check because the fees are very low if that's an option that you can set up. And so give people options on ways to give. Joe, questions about that at all?
Yeah, Richard, I think you're making a lot of good points. So are you going to talk at any point about the fees associated with these transactions?
I really hadn't planned to, because today we're trying to focus on is just getting those recurring gifts going. Joe, we've done other webinars that have that information. And so I really like to point them to those Giving 365, that on-demand resource library, so that we can keep our focus today a little tighter. But I'm certainly glad to do that if it's helpful, if it comes up in a follow-up question.
Thank you.
So other options, I think this is something that you see more of on nonprofit sites than church websites, but gosh, the church has been learning from nonprofits for a long time now. And so this is certainly something that I think you're going to see more of. Consider checkboxes for predetermined gift options. Man, if you're just trying to make it easy for folks, maybe give them some predetermined gift options. You'll notice when we were looking at the St. Jude site earlier, they had a predetermined gift amount that was just their most common, and they haven't selected it, they've just highlighted it. I thought that was a brilliant way to just suggest and make it easy on their donors. Another option is gift frequency options. Now, I'll see these on websites as drop-down menus or check boxes. I'm not saying that the way that you create the option matters. It's just that you give them the option. I personally would always put monthly as my top choice. I see oftentimes where churches have one time as their default, or even as their top or first choice, and that often implies that that's your preferred method. And it's not our preferred method because of transaction fees. Actually, monthly is the best way for you all to get a recurring gift. And so put monthly as the first option. So that that's the first thing that people consider. And then if you want to do twice a month or weekly or one time, again, great options for gift frequency. People don't all get paid the same way, and they're certainly not going to all give the same way. And so options there are the way you want to go.
As you pointed out earlier, Richard, you can also highlight your preferred method, not just put it on top. You can even pre-check it and have people change it if they want to go for a different option.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about default settings, Joe, for sure. I love that idea. I think you're right on track there. We also want to prioritize fund options with a drop-down menu that might include, your ministry plan giving. Some of us call it a budget. I have some clients that are still converting over from calling that the general fund. That's fine. We think it's more compelling to talk about your ministry plan. And so we want to have an option there for ministry plan. You may also have, a missions fund that people can give to, or an outreach or evangelism fund that people can give to. You may have a capital campaign that's going. So you want to have those fund options there. And these are typically seen in a drop-down menu. But Joe, if it's me, I'm going to put the one that I want to drive giving toward first. I'm not going to have my capital campaign listed first, because not everybody who visits my site is going to be somebody who's going to participate in a capital campaign. So I don't want them to have to move away from what I'm suggesting to be able to pick the right thing. I'm going to default to the lifeblood of ministry, which for us in our churches, the lifeblood of ministry is our budget giving. It's our ministry plan. And so we want to set that as the thing that people think about first. And then if they have something else that they're wanting to designate a gift to, then fine. It's a great time also to bring up the fact that having 100 different designated giving ideas is not necessarily what's best for the church. Even though a lot of our churches have a lot of designated funds, I would be more strategic here on your site and just focus on the main funds where you would like electronic giving to be focused. Now, default settings, an important topic that you just brought up, Joe. I think that there are some things that we can kind of pre-check, that we can kind of direct people toward. And I literally saw a church recently that actually had preferred method, put beside some of these choices that they wanted to encourage people to do. So here's some default settings that Horizons thinks are great for our clients to work towards. And that is having a checkbox or having a recurring gift that's already predetermined, that somebody is saying, we're assuming that they want to make a recurring gift. They can uncheck that. They can decide to do a one-time gift. But again, the whole point of this webinar today is helping you optimize recurring giving. And so having recurring giving as a default setting on your page, at least if not already checked, have it as the first option. That's what we want to do. And then monthly gift frequency instead of, twice a month or weekly or one time. ACH and bank draft has the lowest fees associated with any electronic transaction. And so having that ACH bank draft option as a preferred method in whatever way you choose to designate that preference, do that. Let your folks know that this is the way that we want you to participate. This is the way we'd love for you to, but we're going to give you other options that you can also select. And then I think if people have chosen to use credit or debit cards as their preferred method of payment, then giving them the option to cover those processing fees and setting that up as a default setting. We are seeing more and more churches include that, and seeing donors more and more gladly willing to offset the benefit that they get from points on their credit card, or benefits or perks from their credit card use. They're more than happy to cover the processing fees so that they can get those points. Questions about any of those default settings, Joe, or other comments that you're seeing?
Richard, I just want to make the point that one of the great challenges we have in working with churches is we may be working with a business administrator or whoever's responsible for this, and they have their preconceived ideas, their own values of how things should be done. And many times we find that what we're doing is projecting our own preferences on other people. And what I would encourage you to do is you think about this. If you're saying, well, I don't want to pre-check the monthly giving, or I don't want to pre-check the credit card side, to think less really about how you might do it, and think about, are we giving the donor the option? Are we encouraging them to move in our preferred methodology? And give it a try. we see that churches that just simply put the processing option out there, like to cover the fees, you'll get somewhere between 40 and 50% of those fees covered because people know, hey, I'm doing this for the points or the cash back. That even goes up higher when you do use the development plan for reoccurring giving. That's also in Giving 365 because it will encourage you to send out an information sheet that talks about what your fees are, why you prefer bank draft, why you choose this method over this over another. And a lot of folks are not aware of the cost to the church of the credit card, for instance, versus the ACH, which is less expensive. So when you share that with people, when you educate them on that process, then they will do more frequently what you prefer, and that increases giving to the church and lowers your fee cost.
Joe, I love the brochure that we've got in Giving 365. That's a sample of a church in the Dallas area. I think it's in Richardson that did just that. They built a great brochure to really just as an educational tool for their folks. And certainly no surprise to me that they have high participation levels. Okay, so helps. Listen, none of us are as tech savvy as we probably want to be. And so, every once in a while we get into one of these pages and we just need a lifeline. We just need to phone a friend. And so I do want to encourage you to go ahead and take advantage of offering those helps to your folks. Don't wait on them to get frustrated and bail on your system. And so embed a video there and how to do it and walk them through the steps, or maybe just a simple link that says that, hey, if you need help walking you through the steps, here's a link on exactly how to do that. Another great tool is for assistance, please contact. Give them the name and number of a person there on site that can help them be able to set up a recurring gift. That's what they're there for. That's what they want to do. So let's take any barriers, any obstacles out of the way if we can do that. Boy, this is a big issue, Joe. I every time I get a new client coaching them on best practices and next level generosity, I go onto their site and I make a small gift just to kind of see what that interaction is like with their system. And unfortunately, most of what I get back are like the two samples that are here on the screen right now. The first one, thank you for your donation. Your donation feels very generic. It feels like they don't have any idea who I am. My name's not on there. It's like I sent something to somebody that I've never met or never seen. Now, granted, maybe if I'd made a larger donation, the expression of gratitude would have been better. I don't know, but
well, let's hope not.
Yeah, but my $20 gift was out there, and you can see over and over and over again, it feels like this real cold, static experience. At least one of them knew who I was, but again, your donation has been processed. So let's learn. If we're going to have a culture of gratitude, then that starts with the way that we communicate in everything that we do around giving. And so we want to make sure. I have yet to ever make an online donation that I didn't get some type of response back from their system. Like there may be systems that don't, but every one that I've ever made, whether it's in a text or whether it's in an online gift on my phone or on my laptop, whatever, I always get some type of automated response. And what I'd say is let's customize that automated response. So those gift confirmation emails that go out, we want to personalize as much as possible a sincere expression of gratitude. And so if we can put the donor's name, if that'll fill in there, then we want to do that. We want to make it seem like what it is, that we know them and that we care. And so if that's possible, we want to have that sincere expression of gratitude in there because we are grateful, and we certainly should be. And then I would always include at least one, maybe two sentences that connects the impact of that gift with the mission of the church. Now, we don't have to specifically say how that $20 was used, but we do need to say that every $20 or that every gift helps us with the fulfillment of our mission, that helps us be the church that God has called us to be, that helps us reach the next one, or make the greatest impact. And I'm telling you, we are seeing with younger donors that if we do not tell them the difference that their giving is making, that they're not coming back. They will find places to give where they believe that their gift is making an impact. And I certainly believe that thanking them also is a part of that. And so you'll notice
Richard,
that we're
that
not
study I'm sorry,
No,
Richard,
I
that
was just
study
saying.
you mentioned suggests that 68% of millennials, when making their first gift, if they're not thanked, and if you don't share how that gift is going to be used, they will not make a second gift. And it's a little lower for Gen X's, and it goes all the way up. But that's really significant. And what you're looking at in most churches is, again, the default setting that was set up when you put this together. So from a best practices point of view, instead of thanking them for their donation, thank them for the life-changing ministry that they are participating in. You can put a link to a website on there, a video that you've created about how your dollars are being spent, about how your church is on mission and ministry, and that is becoming increasingly important in getting those repetitive gifts.
Yeah, and boy, I love those specific ideas, Joe. And you'll notice that we're not recommending that you ask them for another gift here, right? We're never going to ask for another gift when we haven't even thanked them for the gift they've made and told them the impact that it's making. So that is always the first step. It's not an opportunity to try to re-engage them with a next gift at this point. So. Good stuff. Let's have attitude of gratitude. Let's have a culture of gratitude in our churches. So then, testing your system, is the last point that I want to make. Always test before you take your page live. And if you're already live and you're going to launch new features, always test before you launch new features. And I don't just mean one person. You've got to have different people on different devices, phone, tablet, laptop, desktop, different web browsers. I mean, people use all kinds of different web browsers, whether it's Safari or Windows Explorer or Firefox or Chrome or whatever it is. Just different ways. We want to make sure that our users are going to have the desired experience that we've tried to set up. And so we want to test those things first before we launch. And then we want to build into our system a way that we go through periodically. Maybe for some of you it's monthly, maybe it's quarterly, but we want to just occasionally have people test that system to make sure it's working. I can't tell you the number of donors that I meet in the work that we do that say, yeah, I tried to set up online giving through my church's website and just couldn't do it, couldn't complete even the first transaction. Wanted to do it, but our system wouldn't let me. It wasn't easy enough for me to stick with it. And so we've got to be better than that. We've got to have systems in place. We can't trust memory to do that. We want to have systems. And just some final tips, build that reminder system or notification about ending dates on recurring gifts. If your site, if your giving page requires you to put an ending date on the gift range for how long that recurring gift is to happen, which most of them don't, but some of them might. If yours does require an ending date, then ask that web developer for a way for you to know when that ending date expires. You need to be able to know, because it has happened more than once that I have had a donor say, yeah, I gave online with my credit card and my credit card expiration date hit. And so it quit taking my credit card. And I didn't know that that gift didn't continue until months after it had stopped. So the church didn't realize it, the donor didn't realize it, and now the donor's either got to catch up, or more than likely, the church just misses out on those resources. And then the last thing is that if tech isn't your thing, which I get that, I certainly don't feel like it's mine. You need to find or hire someone to help you. This is urgent. There has never been a more critical time. I just can't imagine where going forward, this isn't going to be an urgent priority for all of our churches. And so find the right person on your team, or hire somebody, find the right person in your church, whatever the case is in your context, get this thing done. It is vitally important to the way that we fund ministry in the days ahead. So what questions do you have for us today? Joe,
all right. So you've got a button at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. You can go ahead and submit questions. We've got a few minutes here. Richard and I will answer some of these questions for you. Do want to remind you that Giving 365 web address is at the bottom of your screen. This is where you're going to go and get the download for it. If you didn't see the previous webinar that's on developing reoccurring giving, I'd encourage you to go back there. There's a lot of information in there. We discuss fees, we discuss basic processes to get there. This is the follow-on webinar to that one, where we are focused on optimizing your web page. So the first question we have is from Donald Erickson. He said, I know you said that fees have been discussed before, but how do we tell our members it's still beneficial to e-give? Richard, you want to try that one?
Sure. The thing that we've got to remember is that we've always had fees that just came to us in various forms. Like when we've hired folks in our office to post contributions manually, or when we've bought envelopes and mailed them to everybody in the church so that they would bring their envelope to Sunday school. Some of you all are old enough to remember when we did that. Joe, there have always been costs associated with giving. And so there are going to be fees. I think sometimes we project our own anxiety about that to others, as you've suggested, Joe, in an earlier point when we were going through the webinar. There are going to be some fees. I think we just share up front what those concerns are with leaders and how we address it. And usually those fees, Joe, are 1% to 3%. And because of the increase in overall giving that we experience with people who give electronically, what we want to be focused on is that 97 to 99% of new giving that we're going to get, not the 1% to 3% that it's going to cost us.
Absolutely. So Patty Glass asked this question, should we add a Give Now button on the homepage as well as the upper right on mobile devices, because I often change the top and the header menus?
So I do think that that's a reason why you see that on some of the nonprofit sites that are probably a little bit more savvy. They're just a little bit ahead because they have to compete for charitable dollars. And so I do think that it's something to consider, that Give Now button for mobile device interaction. And that mobile responsiveness piece is a big deal. And so I certainly think it's something that you should consider. It's a great question, Patty.
So Lorraine asked this question, is a reminder system something that's built into the electronic giving system or within your church's bookkeeping system? And let me tell you, in Richard's prior life, before he became a ministry strategist with Horizon Stewardship, Richard was business administrator at his church. So Richard?
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to guess that many of our existing systems, our giving platform, the platform that our vendor has provided may not have that reminder set up. And so it's a question we want to ask them. And if there's not an internal system for that, Lorraine, then we definitely want to create that system ourselves, just like we do in a first-time giver strategy. We want to make sure that we build those systems into what we do as a church so that they happen and we're not counting on somebody else to do that for us. But there could be, I don't know of a software provider that I know that system is in there.
All right, Charles is asking how to get greater information on ACH giving. How do you set that up at your church and for your church at your banking institution?
Well, so there's a couple places. Charles, you can obviously the e-giving guide, a book that we talked about earlier today. There's information there in the Giving 365 on-demand resource library at Horizons. We've also got a way to lead that initiative with some specific focus on ACH giving. So there are helpful resources available to you.
Charles, in my prior life, I was a bank CEO. The easiest thing for you to do if your church doesn't already have a third-party vendor that you're doing online giving for, if you're looking to set up reoccurring ACH giving, easiest thing to do is go to your bank. You can have it set up this weekend if the lobby's closed. You can call them and tell them you want to set up ACH for your church. They can email you the forms for that. You can sign it, and the information that is required to set that up for each of your donors is essentially the same information that's on their check. Your routing number, account number, name of the individual, and all of that is in the Recurring Development Plan, which is a resource in the Recurring Giving Development Plan, which is a resource in Giving 365. Thanks for your question. Lori's asking the question, Richard, after watching this webinar, I realized I didn't invite the appropriate people for my church to watch this later. Will there be available link that I can forward to these people who have not yet registered? I'll go ahead and take that question. In your everyone who would like to see this can download it from Giving 365. So you can give the Giving 365 sign up, which is just www.giving365.com, to anyone in your church that would like access to watch this video. They'll be able to do it there. Last question. This is from Jennifer. What about the generation after millennials? Maybe there aren't numbers and studies because they aren't just getting it to a place where they start their giving. But I'm curious, do you have any data on Gen Y, Gen Z?
Joe, you cut out there at the end. Did you say Gen Y, Gen Z?
I did, Richard.
So no, I haven't seen that specific data yet. Joe may have seen some. What I would say is that it's just as important as it has ever been for us to disciple our kids and our young people. And I think that when we participate in the act of giving as a part of worship, when it's part of our discipleship path, then that's how we pass along those healthy habits of discipleship, just like the other areas that are so important to us. And so I think just like with millennials, who we find to be very generous, there are reasons why they are. And so I think it's important for us to pass our faith along in the way that we practice. And I think electronic giving is going to be a very normalized way for us to exercise our discipleship, but we're going to have to be intentional in the way that we pass that on.
Richard, thank you for leading us through this presentation today. I've gotten a couple of texts directly to me asking how people can get your book, and if we would restate the name of the book and where it's available.
Yeah, so it was published by Abingdon And so you can find it on Abingdon's website. The easiest place for most people to find it is on Amazon.com. The name of the book is The E-Giving Guide for Every Church. And if you'll type in the E-Giving Guide, there's usually one advertisement, an advertised book that comes up on top, but usually the book is right there second and easily visible on the page when you do that search at Amazon.com.
We want to thank everybody for being a part of this webinar today. Again, in 24 hours, you're going to receive an email that reminds you to go to Giving 365 and download this information. If you've got any questions, you'll notice that in that same email, Richard Rogers' email address is there, and you can send that directly to, send your questions directly to Richard. Evaluating your church online giving platform is something that Horizons does as part of our normal work in developing generosity. We have a process we call Next Level Generosity Discovery, where we look at best practices in church giving compared to what is happening in your church today. We create a report from that, send that to you along with a guide as to steps for your generosity team to take. Coaching's available. So if you are interested in that, you can also send us a note and let us know, and we'll be in contact. One last reminder, Horizons is offering a 30-minute consultation for any church who is, and this is free, who is looking to make adjustments to their giving based on being in social distancing. So if you'd like to have that 30-minute free consultation from one of our 30 ministry strategists, you can find us on the website at horizons.net, and there's a place you can sign up there. Again, thank you for participating.